It
time.
is September 9th, 2021. I'm Michelle Hirsch here with Paulette Bolyard. And Paulette was a longtime Tempe reporter, longtime resident, been here 50 years, and literally talked to thousands of people, done stories on a lot of Tempe things. But we'll start at the beginning, at least the beginning for you.
Okay.
When and where were you born? And
Boy, that is a big.
yeah.
I am from a small town in Pennsylvania just south of Pittsburgh called Washington, PA, where everybody calls it Little Washington because back in the 1800s they didn't want it confused with Big Washington, as if you could. So that is where I am from, born there in 44, so.
And where were your parents from?
Oh boy, my father was from Russia, who came here right around 1900, something like that. And he and his family had 4 sisters. They moved from there here to the United States and settled kind of around the Pittsburgh area. And they came in separate entities. Like the mother came with 2 of the children, and then the dad came with 2. So, and my mother was born in a small town famous for Perry Como, which is Cannonsburg, Pennsylvania. So.
And what did
You
your
remember that?
Yeah.
what did your parents do for work or?
Raise me. No, that was a full-time job. My father, well, first of all, Washington, PA was a blue-collar place. It was manufacturing everything. Duncan Fife glass. I mean, all kinds of things that, from the past they were making. And of course, Pittsburgh was close by, and we had good railway systems. My father was a blue-collar worker in the fact that he owned his father's business, which was called the Washington Window Cleaning Company. So my father washed windows for a living to support myself and my mother and the 2 other sisters I had. However, his goal was always to be an entertainer. He did some time in vaudeville, whether it be opening the curtain or sweeping up or filling in on an act, and he was very well known in that city just by the name Pete. And he was hired a lot of places, for clubs to banquets, to be the MC. He had a little radio show at one time. He did stand-up comedy, he danced, he sang. He was just Mr. Personality. As I wrote about him one time, about wherever he was, there was laughter. And so that's what he did. My mother stayed home, and those were the times of women being home, and she had the world's cleanest house. As children we were taught not to walk on the carpet, and we used to call it Polish carpeting because she put papers down. But she was going to beat Mother Nature with the dirt, and she was way ahead. So that's what they did.
What was it that prompted you to move to Tempe, and when did you move to Tempe?
I arrived here on the exact date, June 20th, 1972. And the reason I came here with my husband and my 2 children was we were in Indiana, which isn't a good place to live because you don't live there, you do time there. But we were at Purdue University, and he was a student there. And we decided we'd come out to this area to visit some friends that spring vacation. And they lived in Mesa, so we stayed there. But we wanted to get into Tempe because we were living in a college town. And we thought, Tempe's a college town. So that was where we were headed after he graduated. We packed up what furniture we wanted to keep, and whatever. The dog went with him. The kids and I flew out here, and here we were. And 2 days after we got here, we took the kids down to show them that there was a river, not unlike the Wabash. It had no water in it, and they're going, "Well, this is cool." Of course, a week later, it was flooded. So we knew we were going to have a good place. So it was mainly because of ASU, but then when we got here, we found out this is not a college town. There's 2 separate cities here. there's the university, and there's Tempe. And they mix well together. We can use their resources, they can use our products, things we have, shop here, buy furniture, live, rent. And it was very different from Purdue, because Purdue had like a campus that everybody went to for, class, and they were very non-committal to the fact that they were at a college. So that's what attracted us.
Tell us a little bit about your children. So you raised 2 children in Tempe, right?
Well, they'll be out of jail soon. How much am I being paid for this? And where are the refreshments? My children went to Curry grade school and then to Conley Junior High. My daughter is my youngest. She lives in Queen Creek now, and she and her husband are planning to, now that their home has reached a sale price of $1 million, are planning to sell that home, buy a home on wheels, a trailer type thing, and do some traveling for at least a year or 2. And he's a mechanic, so he can pick up work anywhere. And my son is in Florida, and I can brag about him because he owns a company that is a concrete forms company, and his clients, in Florida, you have a big fence with a pineapple on, and these are all made from concrete forms. So his clients are people like Disney. He does a lot of their walls, a lot of their, concrete work they need done. The country of Cuba, when he is allowed to go there, because that country doesn't have concrete anymore. And so he has that, and a lot of businesses and a lot of buildings, and he loves architecture. However, he also was asked to step forward, even without any college to do it, to become the coach for the Venice High School, this is in Venice, Florida, Venice High School girls soccer team. Because when he went there, he had played soccer here, right in those fields over there. And he loved it. And he loved the fact that they had girls teams too. So he just recently won the state championship after 5 years and was named Coach of the Year for that city. So, that's been really exciting for us. And he loves it. He loves being Coach Gary, so.
And you have some grandchildren.
Oh my God, I've got 7 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. That's great. And I love being a grandparent, because you all know that when you're a grandparent, you can push your pictures on anybody. But when you're a parent, you don't. You hold back, But when you're a grandparent, it's all out there.
Do you have some favorite memories of your family, raising your kids in Tempe, either places you would go or businesses you went to, or favorite celebrations?
I have so many. But one of the things I remember is not long after we moved here, Tempe Daily News had a little magazine type section that came out like on a Friday. And they were running a contest for the most unusual pet in Tempe. We had a boxer dog named Wendy Keepers. And when you're at Purdue, there is also a veterinarian school there. There's a school for everything there. And I remember that we took her over there, and she had her ears cropped and everything. And she was a brindle boxer. And she could talk. And the kids would hold up a biscuit, and she would say, "I love my mama." And then they'd say, "What's on a house?" And she'd go, "Roof." This is, So they entered her in the most unusual pet contest. And I get a telephone call one day, and it's somebody from the newspaper, and they asked if Wendy was there, and I said, "No, she's tied up at the moment." And so they said, "Well, we have this entry." And I go, "Entry for what?" Well, the funny thing that happened was they decided that she was the most unusual pet. So they came over to hear her talk. The kids appeared on the front page of that little magazine, with Wendy, their faces up, dirty faces for playing out all the time. And so the story appeared, and everybody knew, everybody watched it, everybody looked at it, everybody thought it was cute. And my husband at the time was associated with the Y. He helped put the Y on the map here. They were in a little office over in Gentilly, and he put together the Y Indian guides. And so he was one of the first people to start bringing in the groups. And that's where I met a lot of fun people, because my daughter and I joined what were called the Indian Maidens with the Tempe Y. And of course, the schools opened up and let us have their buildings to meet in, to do projects. So that's one of the things you love about Tempe is we'll help you. We might be a school, but you're welcome here. So what happened was my husband wasn't good at speaking in public. As you can see, that I'm a big ham, which I get from my father. And he was going up to Skyway Camp in Prescott to speak to a group about the Indian guides and about being the chief and putting all this together and how this works and and there were supposed to be quite a group there. And when he's up there, he's really excited because he's giving this talk, you know, and he's like, they're looking at him as an official. Somebody was a ground starter. He did it. And then he asked if they had questions, and somebody raised their hand, and he goes, yeah. He goes, and the guy says, is Wendy your dog? Here's my husband up there giving a big speech about this thing, and all they're worried about is that talking dog is yours, huh? You know, so that kind of put him in his place. So that's one of the funny things that happened here, thanks to the Tempe Daily News. So.
Is there anyone in your family that you would like to know more about that you don't know? Maybe you'd like to find out about.
That's interesting because. No, I wouldn't. And I'll tell you why. The night before my mother was buried, we became aware, meaning we, the three girls. We had Connie, who was the oldest, then Patricia, who was the middle, and I was the baby of the family, and I'm still the baby of the family, and you never grow out of that. And we found out that Connie was only our half-sister. And my mother left her birth certificate in her purse. And I never really knew who her other family was or anything. And I don't want to know, because to me, she's always my sister. So, no, I pretty well know a lot about my family and the things they did and the things they shouldn't have done. So.
Can you tell us a little bit about going to MCC and becoming a reporter?
Well, that started in second grade. I went to a Catholic school, Immaculate Conception. And in second grade, instead of having a nun teaching us, we had a lady named Miss Aiken. And Miss Aiken always wore brown suits. You know, she didn't wear the black habit or anything. And so the rumor was always among these kids with that was she had been a nun and kicked the habit. That was their thing. And so Miss Aiken wanted everybody for Valentine's Day that year to make up a poem. And the best poem would go home in everybody's Valentine. They were hearts with the lacy on it, you know. And she picked my poem. I was a 7-year-old. And she picked my poem, which said, put your heart close to mine and be my Valentine. I was published. I was published in second grade. Everybody went home with my words in their card. And ever since then, I wanted to be a writer or a dancer, because I took a lot of ballet and modern jazz and all that. But the nice thing about that was I always tell everybody, I was published at second grade. So when I was at Purdue, there wasn't any journalism class there that I could take. So I was mother, and I worked as a telephone operator, and you know, it was a fun thing to do. So when I came here, instead of going to ASU, which was, I couldn't get in during that time, I went to Mesa Community College because they had a journalism class, and they had a couple of newspapers and a literary magazine. And I fell in love with it. I could find the greatest stories. I'm very, as you could tell by me talking so much, I'm very creative. I can find good stories everywhere. And I once had to cover cops and all that, and I didn't like that. I liked the feature stories where I found somebody who had a great story to tell, and I got to tell it for them from their words. So Mesa Community College, it took me about 3 years to get through there. And I really wasn't sure whether I could get a job on a daily newspaper. But I went down to the Tempe Daily News, walked over to Peggy Bryant's desk, said to her, I don't know if you're hiring, but I'm looking. And I told her that I had been at MCC, and I brought my clips in and showed her all the things and everything. Next day she called and hired me. And I was going to take care of the society page and the entertainment page. And so Mesa Community College put me there. Years later, they offered me to come in and teach a non-credit class, which was for freelance magazine writing. And this is where I met Michelle. First night of class, she showed up with a baby in her arms. You know, of course. Yeah. Do you remember that?
Baby's 35 now.
Yes, do you remember that? I thought that was a little odd, but then I thought she's got something going there, you know. And he was great. He didn't cry at all. She did. But so that's how I got involved with Mesa Community College, and it was a great place. Came out of there, and I didn't have money to go to ASU and get it, but I did get the job at the Tempe Daily News. I was there for four and a half years. I loved it. You were talking about funny things that had happened. When I moved here, I didn't know the lay of the land, of course, and I had to meet people. So some of the people I met with the Indian guides had a Halloween party. And I went to it, and I had no idea what this was all about, but suddenly the back door opened, and there was somebody standing there in a raincoat with gray hair and a camera. And they started taking pictures and yelled, Jan Young, Tempe Daily News. Now, I don't know if you all remember her, but Jan always wore a raincoat. She always went out to take the pictures of the car wrecks. She loved those. Those were the best. She would get there before the cops or the firemen, you know. And so she was a legend here, you know. And so I had no idea why that was funny or who this Jan Young was until I went to work there and met her and went, oh, you're Jan Young. So, but the thing was, the guy threw open the raincoat and he had a bikini on. So, you know, like that's, but she told me the reason she wore that was that she had to throw some clothes on and get to that place to take the photo. And you don't let time lag when you're doing photojournalism. So she was one of the characters around here. She was one of those people that everybody knew. So I think not too long ago, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, they had an exhibit of her pictures at the Historical Museum.
Oh.
So.
Now, I happen to know that you have had the opportunity, many opportunities, to interview so many well-known and not well-known people in Tempe, from business owners to people on the street to the former mayor, Senator and Congressman Harry Mitchell.
Oh yes, Harry. Harry was a good interview.
And so, can you share a couple of stories of people that you interviewed that you know, people have heard of, or even if they haven't heard of them, just fun stories of interviewing people in Tempe?
One of the first stories I did when I came to the Tempe Daily News was to interview a gal who had ESP. And she was going to be giving a presentation, I think on campus at ASU. And I had a hard time with that story because she answered the questions before I asked them. And what do you do as a reporter? You're like, stop that, you know? But it was proof that she could do this. So that was very interesting. I met a lot of celebrities because I covered the entertainment. Harry Mitchell was a delight. When he became mayor, he was always good for a story. And I talked him into doing some things that were kind of crazy. For instance, if you all remember Dewey Hopper, who was with, I think, Channel 12, and he used to put on these charity basketball games to help club groups and that sort of thing. And he had held a lot of them in here, in the city of Tempe. So we decided, this was the Boys and Girls Club, which I was on their board for a while, and we decided that to help this game, we were going to have a I Look Like Dewey Hopper look-alike contest. And so I needed to generate interest in this. So I went over to City Hall and I had said to Harry, you have to join. You have to get in this. And he saw the benefit, that if he was in it, then other people would join. And I remember talking to him and I said, one of the questions on your entry blank is, why do you think you look like Harry, look like Dewey Hopper? And he sat for a while, thought about it, and he looked out the windows and looked back at me and he said, and he started out and I said, he was saying something like, I'm about his same, I'm a little bit taller than him, and I'm going, Harry, that's all wrong. What you want to say is, I don't look like Dewey Hopper, but I'm who Dewey Hopper wished he looked like. So, and Harry did it. He put that on his entry, and it made a great story. I came from a place near Waynesburg, Pennsylvania, where every July 29th for over 100 years, it had rained on that day. And they held a big celebration called Rain Day. And the mayor there would bet his hat against other people, both celebrities, whether it be Bob Hope or something, that if it didn't rain on that day, he'd send him a Waynesburg hat. And if it did rain, so you had to send him a hat. So I got Harry involved in it, like he had a lot of things to do as mayor, things really started moving when he came into office, but here he was willing to go through this. And I remember saying to him, what makes you such an expert on whether it's going to rain back in Pennsylvania or not? And he was going into something and I said, Harry, you're the mayor of a desert town. What do you know about rain? And he goes, to tell you the truth, nothing. So, and it did rain that day in Waynesburg. And so Harry had to send a Tempe hat, which he was pleased to do, very much so. I interviewed people who had kids who did great in school. I interviewed people who were just, building their business, people who were very successful, people who were neighbors who did something together for their community. This town was full of people who wanted to get along, who wanted to see things done. And that's what I really liked about Tempe. It was always in action, Something was always going on. So that was fun to grow up here.
How have you seen either your neighborhood or even downtown, different areas of Tempe change since you've been here?
Well, there's too many cars. We have to say that. It's a pass-through city, remember, and when I moved here, there wasn't even any left-hand turn lanes, and the freeway only went to McClintock. And our mayor right now, he was riding a tricycle, so that's how long ago it was. I've seen neighborhoods change in the way of looking better, building up pride in your property. I've seen neighborhoods change because suddenly somebody came in, bought an apartment complex, tore it down, put something else. So there's always been something going on to try to make it a better place to look at besides live in. So, and I noticed that a lot of young families still move here. There's lots of kids here for the schools. So, good place.
Is there something you're particularly proud of with the city of Tempe? I mean, you've mentioned a lot of great things about Tempe. Is there something that you're proud of?
Yes. For years, I have pushed this idea that we have a bridge that in many years was the only way to get over that river because of the flooding. That bridge is probably, 85 years old now, something like that. And I've always believed the city of Tempe needs an official souvenir. And to me, that souvenir is a small replica of that bridge inside a bottle, a little cork on the end, and maybe a little bar in the front that says when it was built, Tempe, Arizona. Doesn't have to be over 6 inches, doesn't have to be giant. affordable enough for people who want to own it because they live here or they want to give it to somebody. And I think that needs to be their standard souvenir. You probably never knew that, did you?
Mm-mm.
I've talked to a lot of people who could manufacture those, they say, you know. So that's something I think that Tempe needs and that I've wanted to see.
An official souvenir, yeah.
Yeah, an official souvenir, that's right.
I know that I could say something that was significant that you've accomplished, just because in my life, if I hadn't walked into your class, I'm going to try not to get choked up.
With
I
a baby.
I wouldn't have become a community reporter.
That's right.
And
she's had a run in the field of being a reporter.
Because of you, because not only because, and I don't want it to be about me. It's that you had classes of students that you not only taught, but encouraged and inspired. I know when I finished your class, it was fun, and I just left it at that. And I didn't have enough confidence. You called me up and said, "What are you going to submit? Let's get you published." And so
I saw talent.
You encouraged your students beyond just taking the class, and
it's very nice
so
of you to
you
say
have
that.
Impacted my life and many other lives. I know other students that went on to write both locally and nationally.
Yes.
And so you've had that impact in people's lives,
and I'm very jealous of those people.
But what would you say is some accomplishments that you're particularly proud of or excited about for yourself?
I was going to say it was the time that my street flooded and people were driving through it and walking baby carriages and big, housing things. And the water was lapping under my front door, where if it came through the roof, the insurance would cover it, but if it came under the front door. And I was going to say that probably my proudest thing was to take sawhorses with my neighbor and shut the street down. And of course, the police came along and said, "You can't do this." So we let them move the things. And the minute they left, we put them back up. So we saved a lot of homes there from getting water under their door. Because it was it was up on Los Feliz, and it was a lower kind of road, But my favorite thing, I don't know that I've done anything outstanding other than just live here and find people who had great stories to tell. I mean, I would be out of my shoes excited about somebody I found. There was a guy who called himself a fireplace doctor, and he came to the Tempe Daily News, to the parking lot at the back, and he had on the back of his truck an actual fireplace. And he had built this as a way it could heat your whole home. Well, to demonstrate it, he started a fire. And we had the entire fire department there because you were not allowed to have a fire in the city. And of course, I didn't know that. So that story was more exciting with all the fire equipment there. So I had an opportunity to just be in the pulse of Tempe, finding a new business, writing about somebody who did something spectacular. I mean, there were just so many great things going on and so many people out there who were willing to talk to me. And I loved it. I love the idea that I could find these people. I could give them press. I didn't have to write about any murders. I didn't have to write about any of those things. And I think that was pretty good. Now, I did write a column. I started out calling it Mother Knows Best. It was N-O''S, and it was about kids, and my kids especially. And I'd throw other things into it, Then we kind of moved on because the kids were, they're getting tired of seeing that stuff in the newspaper, even though it was true, and all the things they did. But I started doing more about Tempe, and so when they had the cooking outdoors, what's that called when they cook outdoors? Solar cooking. They had down at the Kiwanis Park, they had a big solar cooking convention. So I wrote a column about it, and I put in my own solar recipe, which was called Solar Toast. and you would put a piece of bread on a fork and hold it up to the sun. Now, the idea was don't look at the sun because that would fry your eyeballs, and that was another recipe. So I really felt good that I could bring this stuff to the people who lived here so they might go and enjoy it. I felt like a town crier at times. So if you want something spectacular, that's what I did.
But you've also inspired a lot of people like Michelle.
Isn't it wonderful? She's going to have a billboard up sometime with my picture on it. I just know, because she's always complimenting.
I am your biggest fan, that's for sure. Well, and I know that it's just part of your personality and your talent that you can pass by people or businesses and places and just come up with what we might call an angle or a hook for a story.
Yes.
And you and I have been going somewhere and seen a business and you come out with that would make a great story and article. And it was a fun time writing for whether it was the Arizona Republic Tempe Neighbors column,
Yes.
or your Mother Knows Best, or
I remember one of those that I did, and it was about the New Year's Eve parties that we had. That was wonderful. But the angle I used was, how in the heck did we have all those people, 100,000 people down there, eating and playing and drinking and then the next day the streets were clean? So I focused on the fact is, who cleaned this up? And how did they do it? Because you made this mess. Every reader that was reading that, they made that mess. And they loved it. On the other hand, I once wrote a column about the water in Tempe, and that the fact that it tasted so bad that Irwin Allen was making a disaster movie about it. And that if you asked for a glass of water in a restaurant, they brought it to you in a container that had a skull and crossbones on it. So I just was outrageous putting down the water in Tempe. So they invited me over to find out how they did the water cleaning and what they did to provide water to all of us. And so I did it, and one of the things I found out that everybody there was named, was it Mike? Everybody seemed to be named Mike there, and I thought, well, if you have the name Mike, you could work here, It was very interesting how, no, it was Bill. It was a water bill, I kept calling them, the water bills. And they didn't really appreciate it, but got a lot of phone calls, so.
Well, and yeah, it was fun that you could focus on different aspects in the city, different people in the city, and then, if it's not evident, that you would add a dose of humor.
Heaven forbid.
And
well, I always tell the funny things and everything.
Yeah.
One of the stories that I did was right after New Year's, one of the years we were doing those Tempe things. I called a fortune teller. And I asked him to tell me the fortune for the city of Tempe for the next year. And he came up with some fabulous things. See, this is what you really love, is to find a person who could feed you all that. Now, I used to cover church and religions. There's nothing better than talking to a preacher, talking to the pastor of a church, because you'd ask them 2 questions, they do 20 minutes flat, but you didn't have to say anything more. And they always had the greatest quotes. And they went along with what I was asking, because it was always kind of, iffy and that sort of thing. And that's one of the things I found here. I found one of the persons I felt had the most intelligence and the best common sense was Rabbi Pinkwasser. I don't know if any of you ever knew him. He was the rabbi for the synagogue down on Rural, and I would go to him a lot of times for stories because he had such great angles and he was so good. And when he became part of the organization where the churches worked with the city to help people who needed help, like you needed a place to live or you needed food or something. This man got up there in front of everyone after they announced that he was president, and he said, "Now you're being smart. You're getting a Jew to get you the money you need." He said it, and I felt as though he was probably one of the most common sense and human people in this city. And he went on to get out of the clergy and became an owner in a casino up in Vegas that he was going to call the Holy Rollers, but he didn't. and he ended up working for Southwest Airlines and just being one of their best attendants. So he was somebody that I was really thrilled to talk to, because he always was able to give me, that story that you were looking for how people celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah and how they try to blend them. And he had recipes for Seder so that you were eating healthy food. He was great. If you wanted a good quote, you'd call him.
How has faith or spirituality impacted your life?
Ooh. Well, let's see. There was the miracle. No. I attended a Catholic school for 7 years. And then in the 8th year, high school started in my town, and my parents had said, you can go to the parochial school or go to the public school, or you could stay with the Catholic school. Well, I don't know if I got a great education at the Catholic school, but I do know that it didn't prepare me for public school at all. And the nuns, I'm sorry, were mean. They were cruel. And so I wanted to go there. But spiritually here, I have found many people associated with the church in the way of just being officers, pastors, pastors' wives. They all have this sense of wanting to do good. And sometimes they run into a wall where they can't do what they want. That, oh no, we can't do that sort of thing. So when the dam broke in Tempe Town Lake, I wrote this little thing and sent it to the editor that said something about, Tempe Town Lake is now Tempe Town Leak. And the dam is gone. And I said, we need to help this city for that. This is something we should be proud of. So I challenged everybody to give $1, give a dam. Churches were calling me and saying, can we do this for collection? I'm like, no, this was just kind of a joke. People were taking dollar bills, and it was Harry's son who was mayor then, and it was great. And I thought, man, if you wanted to put a campaign on, give $1, give a dam, that would be great. Let's make some money here. So, and spiritually, there's a lot of people here who want to see churches involved with Tempe. They don't want you just to come and sit there on Sunday morning. They want you to come to their parties, their picnics, their specialty things, and they want to be part of what you're doing. So it's like the Hayden's Fair, that's such a wonderful thing. And they should have a booth. They should have something that, they should be allowed to be there to show off the people who make up those churches and make up those congregations. When I did the religion for the Republic, religion and church news, one of the things that I established was what I called a preacher profile. Sometimes I can't talk. A pastor profile. And I would start it out like an old Doer Scotch ad, where you would ask them, your name, your age, how long you've been there, and then I'd ask them things like, describe yourself with one word, and what's the sign on your desk, because a lot of them had little signs or something. I had one who had a piece of the Berlin Wall on his desk, and we found out that advertising in that section increased because people were looking at those profiles And they were deciding, they were new in town, they were deciding, hey, I like this pastor. I like what he had to say. Oh, he's from my hometown. Or, oh, he went to the same college I did. And they felt like somebody had drawn a map and took a picture that was in print of a guy or woman that they wanted to go and join their church, or at least try it out. And even the pastors told me that. They said, this is a way for them to get to know us. I would like to someday return to doing that again, because it was the greatest stories. You never knew where these people came from or how they got into the ministry. And they really reflected the personality of the congregation. And you knew that you wanted to fit in there. So,
Do you have?
but I didn't get holier, so.
You are able to share a lot of interesting stories because you've written about Tempe. But do you have some particularly fond memories or experiences that stand out for you that makes that focuses on Tempe? So things that fond memories here. And you've alluded to
That's old stuff. Oh, just the people I met up with. I, at one time, did public relations for Tempe St. Luke's, which is a very interesting part of this city. It's big and bright and bigger now, but you have to remember that when they had that hospital open, they didn't have cribs. They kept them in carts, grocery store carts, those babies. That was the only hospital there. Of course, when Harry had his appendix out, he went to Mesa, but we're not going to hold that against him. And I found that there were, here I was doing PR there, and I found there were so many stories in that hospital. It was just, the history of it, the fact that there were young people who were starting their careers there, nurses who had been there for years, who had stories to tell about things that had happened, and how the hospital grew from a very small, private type thing into something big. And I remember the stories from there that I pushed out as a public relations person. And one of the things that I developed to do was I got a pediatrics nurse to join me, and we went to school to see first and second graders. And she would bring along a hospital gown and the mask, the needles, the blood pressure thing, and she would talk about, going to the hospital and what you could find. And so I'd go along with her, and we had a doll that we called Luke, and he had a cast on his arm. And she had some x-rays of when she broke her arm, so she'd take those along, So sneaky kids try to see what name's on there. But and so we had this doll, and he had a little cowboy outfit and everything. And one of the most interesting things that happened during those children who just hung on every word she said and everything I said, and looked at the needles and looked at the gowns, because she'd put the gown on them and the kids would laugh and everything. One of the most interesting things was how I would ask that final question, how many of you been to the hospital? Do you want to tell us about it? These children had such a need to tell about their experience in the hospital. Nobody had asked them. Even their parents probably wanted them to forget it anyway. But they had such a need. And to me, that program was so much fun for us, but the kids, they loved it. And they went home with a little message that says, today a nurse visited and told us about going to the hospital. Because I have a children's book called Biddle the Bear Goes to the Hospital that I had published back in the 70s. And it was a story about a little bear who ends up in the hospital to get his tonsils out. And it was not for children's parents to read to them as much as it was for them to learn what it was like to go to the hospital. I interviewed children about that. I said, what scares you the most? You know what they were scared of the most? X-rays. They're in a dark room by themselves with this big machine hanging over them. They didn't care about the shots. They cared about this machine falling on them. I never knew that.
Interesting.
So So having this nurse, her name was Kathy, visit them, and she'd be in her scrubs and everything, and so they had such a need to repeat what they went through and how it felt. So if you have any children in your families, if they have an experience, ask them about it. It will be like a whole load off of them to share it. And I wish we could get that information out there to say, get your kids to talk about it. So that was one of the fun things we did.
Is there anything else related to your life, your family, your education, your work, or other experiences in Tempe that I haven't asked about that you would like to share?
Good question. I think I taught you.
I was just going to say that same thing.
I think that you are going to end up with such a long list because there are so many interesting people here of different backgrounds who come here for many different reasons, and they're not disappointed. I've always lived in Tempe. I had when my house was being built, I had to move to Mesa into an apartment. That was the longest month of my life, There was just something about, I never wanted to live in Mesa. I wanted Tempe. Right now I am single because I'm a widow, and I live in Tempe. I don't have anybody with me. My daughter lives in Queen Creek. She has been fighting me to move out there, and I'm saying, but everything I do is in Tempe. I'd have to drive back here all the time. And she really wants me to move out there. I think she wants to take care of me. You know how your children become your parents when you get older, right? And so, no, Tempe is unique in many ways. And if they just get that bridge in the bottle, they can have the most spectacular souvenir. The bridge is, at one time when I was on the board for the Tempe Art Center, we were going to have the bridge shut down. Now that's a national highway on there. And we did manage to get them to say they'd shut it down for a day. And we were going to have a juried art show. And all artists from the state of Arizona could come with photos, watercolors, oils, ceramics, structures, popsicle sticks, with images of this bridge and how they saw it. And they were going to actually be on the bridge with no traffic, and everybody could view all of these. And then there would be judges and juries, and that would set us apart very much to the one thing that we have relied upon. When I moved here, you could drive under the bridge to get across, So if you're out there and you have any influence, let's hear it for the bridge in the bottom. And I don't want any money for it, believe me. Well, maybe a little, but Michelle's such a great audience, So.
We didn't even talk about how you've done stand-up comedy, but I'm
we
sure
don't want to hear about that. No,
that's probably not a surprise. Some of the, I shouldn't say some. A lot of people have read your articles and your columns and don't even realize it's you. A lot of times the byline is ignored or people just breeze right over it. I will occasionally talk to somebody and they will mention something they've read. For example, not too long ago, somebody told me about reading an article about the expansion of McClintock and rural was getting so ridiculous that it was going to have to be called McRural. And I'm like, Paulette wrote that article.
Yes.
Can you tell us just a snippet of that funny story?
That was in Tempe Magazine.
Okay.
And I don't know if any of you remember Tempe Magazine. Judy Todd was the editor, and Michelle wrote for it, and I wrote stories. And the idea was to glorify Tempe. And so I was driving on McClintock, and I noticed that they had added 2 more lanes or something, And I said, well, what if they kept doing this? If they kept adding them, then McClintock would reach down to rural, and we'd have to name it'd be like 19 or 20 lanes, and we'd have to name it McRural. So I put it in the future. I dated it for the future, and Harry's daughter and son were city officials. I think I had picked his daughter to be mayor, and his son was the something else, and I talked about the fact that this became the parade street of the country. Anybody who wanted to have a parade came here to rural Lidcock because there were 20 lanes of traffic there. So, but that's me. I find some ridiculous ideas out there. So
Another one was someone said someone should do a story on all of the excuses that people give when they're trying to get out of a ticket. And I said, I know someone who wrote that article.
Oh my God, that was fun.
You actually interviewed a judge.
Well, you all remember the judge who looked like that comic star. I can't remember his name. Is that awful? Chevy Chase. He looked like Chevy Chase. And he went to Vegas, and somebody had said they were doing a performance, and he said, hey, we got Chevy Chase in the audience, and they said, stand up, and he was like, didn't want to, because he wasn't Chevy Chase. But the more he didn't stand up, the more they applauded and screamed for him to stand up. So he kind of went on that, and then there was some kind of scandal type thing, and he was gone. That's what happens with these Chevy Chase lookalikes. But that was a good story, because there were a lot of people who had excuses that they thought was pretty good, And I remember I took my grandson, Michael, because we wanted to do a picture of Michael on a tricycle at the curb with a cop giving him a ticket. And the cop said, no, we don't want that kind of publicity. And I agreed with him. No, you don't pick on kids. You wouldn't pull a kid over and give him a ticket on a tricycle. But so we had him in court. We took Michael. He was 4 years old, and we took him up and put him up on the judge's bench. And somebody had an idea of putting a quarter down, and so when they put it down, they said, Michael, you can have that. And he put his hand on it, and it was looking right at the judge. So it was a great picture. And there were a lot of people here in this city who gave some pretty strange excuses. I also did one about things people lose here. I told the student union, and they said we get a lot of one shoes. Just like on the road, we have one shoe. Call the bus station. Umbrellas, clothes, And every place I called, they had some very strange things. And I called us a city of losers. But it was interesting, because people started calling me and telling me things that they had lost, and if anybody had found them. And I go, I'm not a lost and found center. So you sometimes get yourself in trouble that way. I think another interesting story that I did was we have a pedestrian crossing over the freeway off of College. You all know that, right? And there were often times at prom time I would see kids up there eating. That's where they were having their prom dinner. So I wrote this crazy column, and I was saying how to celebrate Columnist Day, because there was like a National Columnist Day. And I kept saying, like every other hint was take a columnist to lunch, or you could do this and take a columnist to lunch. So 2 disc jockeys in Mesa, Schiebel and Larson, read this on the air, and they said, wait a minute, we should go to lunch. They should take some disc jockeys to lunch and everything. So I said, you're on. And I called them up and I said, I do want to take you to lunch. Well, I got Herman's Restaurant, if you all remember when Herman's was down at the corner of Mill and Southern. And it was after Herman Fraser, who was an Olympic medal winner, if you remember him, and he was in charge of the track department later on at ASU. Famous athlete. I went to their restaurant. I figured they'll go along with this. And I said to him, could you possibly serve lunch on one of your beautiful oak tables with the velvet seats up on the bridge, the pedestrian bridge? Sure, why not? So I told them that I was going to, take them out for lunch. So I went into Mesa and picked them up, and I took them to College Avenue as we were driving down there, and they're like, well, where are we going, you know? So I got out and slammed the car door and said, you know, we're going to eat up there. And there was the table and, you know, flowers on it and a waitress standing there. And they got up there and they were like, well, you know, they acted like they'd never eaten over a freeway. I mean, come on, you know. So we sat there, the cops showed up to find out why we were up there, and we said, having lunch, and they went, oh, okay. And so, like it was happening all the time. And that story brought out, it was on TV, it was on in a disc jockey magazine, it was in a lot of different publications as to what goes on in Tempe. Yeah, you go out there and have lunch on the freeway, you know, so.
Well, it is,
There's a million stories in this naked city. Oh, I've heard that before.
and I was, it's a pleasure to hear some of the stories. I'm truly blessed to be your friend and to have walked in
You're
that
gonna make
classroom.
me cry. You
have
heard
walked
her
in
here
that
say
classroom
this, you know,
35
so
years
if I
ago.
need you in court.
But I think it's fun for other people to hear some of the ways that you've been able to highlight the people and places and businesses of Tempe, and even think about the people behind the stories that they read in the paper, and a lot of those stories are captured in when people are doing their family research and research of all kinds. So
Oh, how nice.
it's
Yeah.
just it's wonderful to talk to someone that not only lives and loves Tempe, but has captured that for so many people.
Oh, thanks. It's been a pleasure to write about Tempe. There's so many stories here. If you stand in line at the grocery store, you can find out. My husband used to always say to me, you know, we go somewhere and by the time we leave, you know everyone there. And I go, yeah, because everybody has a story. In fact, I often answer my phone, hello, what's your story?
You do.
So,
You absolutely do.
T-shirts will be out soon.
Thank you so much, Paulette.
Oh,
Thank you.
This has been an honor.
Thank
I
you.
mean, I love talking about what I've done and all that. This has really been an honor for me. And to meet all of you, that you're so interested in putting Tempe up on a mountain and letting people see that this is a great place.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you know, I remember the day that they put apartments on top of a carport. Remember? And Monty's. I mean, Monty's is such a great place. You should interview one of their family members. They're a
I
little
think
bit
Michael
crazy.
Monty is on the list of
Yeah,
people to
they're a
interview.
little bit crazy, but that's okay, you know, because there were so many of them. And in fact, when he died, I had written a column that, you know, I wasn't an obit writer or anything. I'd written a column that maybe we might think about renaming the bridge the Monty Bridge, because it was right at the footsteps of that restaurant. So,
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that.
yeah, that was the place to go, right?
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
else would serve spaghetti with a steak?
Yeah.
I'd never heard of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Very good.
You guys have been great.
Now, I
Good
think-
listeners.
Did anybody?
Anyone else?
Usually they open it up so that anybody else can ask questions if they want.
Oh, well, do I get
So-
extra for that?
You know, while people are thinking of questions, I'd like to tell a story. You talked about traffic tickets, and I have a story about Michelle that maybe you have not heard.
Oh, really?
So Michelle
I
was
bet I
driving
haven't.
on McClintock, and she was going 80 miles an hour. And the traffic officer pulled her over and went up to the car window and said, "Ma'am, I need to see your driver's license." And Michelle said, "I'm sorry, officer, my license expired 3 years ago." He said, "Oh, great." He said, "Okay, I need to see the registration for your vehicle." And Michelle said, "Well, officer, this is a stolen vehicle." And so he said, "Oh my gosh, is there anything else you need to tell me?" And Michelle said to the officer, "Yes, there's somebody in the trunk tied up." He said, "Okay, I can't handle this." And he called the commander.
No.
Commander came a few minutes later, went up to the window and said to Michelle, "Ma'am, I understand that you don't have a driver's license." And she said, "Yeah, I do." She reached in her purse, pulled out the driver's license and showed him. And it was valid, it was good. And he said, ma'am, the officer also told me that this was a stolen vehicle. And Michelle said, well, let me show you. So she reached in the glove box, pulled out the registration, it was all good. Well, ma'am, the officer also told me that you have someone tied up in the trunk. She said, well, let's take a look. She went back with the officer, lifted up the trunk, there was nothing in there. And then Michelle said to the commander, and I bet he also told you that I was speeding.
Oh, that's
that's
the
good.
treasure. Michelle and I were in business together at one time. We had a business called Celebration Video. And our customers were people who were going to give parties for someone who had retired or was having a birthday or something. We got a microphone and a video camera, and we went out to places where there were people shopping, and we would go up and ask them, for instance, what's your last name?
Rowan, R-O-E-N, Rowan.
Okay. We would go up and tell somebody that you were having a birthday. And did they want to give you wishes? Happy birthday wishes, you know. They didn't know who we were. You know, I was with the microphone, and we'd said, yeah, this is your chance. And they'd go, well, yeah, you know. Or they'd say, who? You know, so we would get all kinds of crazy answers, like, oh, yeah, but who is it, you know? And so we would make up this like 10-minute video of us interviewing just people going around.
Just
strangers on retirements or birthdays or anything. And they were the cutest things. And then you had people say, get out of here. And then you had people say, is this going to be on 12 News? You know, I mean, and so they would show it at these parties, which was very humiliating for the birthday boy or birthday girl, or if they were getting married or whatever was going on. We had a great time with that. We should do that again.
That was fun.
I was always waiting for us to get arrested, though. But then you could tell them, you know. But
That was
a great
back
story.
in the day when we had a video camera that was huge. I did the video.
Yeah.
You can imagine who was in front of the camera. But that was when I had a great
Well, she
big...
laughed all the time. You could always hear her laughing.
Good.
So,
Yes.
that was fun.
Questions? Yes.
Just a couple. What years did you work at the Tempe Daily News?
I worked there from about 1977 to 1981.
And when did you move to Tempe?
I moved there in 72.
And your children went to Conley Middle School?
Yes.
Was Frank Conley still at the Tempe Daily News when you were there?
Yes. I loved Frank. He was a cranky thing.
That school was named for Frank Conley.
Yeah, for him and his
Oh,
wife, Irma Conley.
Interesting.
They were really neat people. He was cranky. You know, he loved to make trouble with people because he had newspaper ink in his blood. But his wife considered us all family. And I remember one time he came up to my desk, said to me, we don't do movie reviews in this paper. And I'd already done like 3 movie reviews. And I said, but I do them because people like to go to the movies. And you're going to pick up advertising from the movies now, from the movie theaters. And there wasn't a whole lot around in the 70s, you know. So he walked back to the office. She came up. What did he say to you? I said, he's giving me a $50 raise. She went back there to that office, so he never came to my desk again. No, I'm just kidding. He was fun.
Were they still using linotype in those years?
Yes, they were. The computers didn't really come in until the Tribune people bought them, you know, and then the whole newspaper changed a lot. They got away from I mean, this was the paper. If your kid played Little League ball, his name or her name got in the paper. You know, we had local news. You lived in Tempe, you got in the paper for whatever reason, whether you were good, bad, or ugly.
Well, back to the linotype, did you ever have to chase type lice?
No. I didn't have to do
You know
that.
what that was, right?
I
Those
think,
little linotype men that would tell the young paper boys and the new people that they have this type lice problem, and they would pry apart
oh yes, I've heard this.
the type, and then you put your head down, they'd let it go back and spray ink on your face.
Yes. I remember that, yeah. You know who I've always said, and even written stories about it, the most important person on the newspaper staff is the person who brings it to your front door. Because if they don't get it there, Nobody knows if you're a good paper or bad paper. And they do that. They bring, we do a product in one day, and they're out delivering it, you know? I was absolutely floored when Labor Day came and the Republic didn't print a newspaper. I had never heard of that. What if something happened? What if there was a big explosion? What if, what if we went to war? I just could not believe that they did that. And they've become very corporate now. They're very bottom line. How much money can we make? That's why you see wraparound ads and, it's just very different now.
To your point, when you did the Tempe Neighbors column, I know I did the Chandler Neighbors column for the Arizona Republic, and I remember Jeff Dozbaba, when he hired me, he said, Michelle, your job is to get people's names in the paper, whether it's the kid riding their bike or the students doing a project at school. It's getting those names in the paper because their parents and their grandparents and their aunts and uncles will want to see those articles and their names in the paper. So it was a fun time when we did local news and we could get people's stories and names in the paper.
And it was fun stuff. I mean, it was light and bright. They call those stories brights, because they're fun to read and they're good news. Mm-hmm. And I have to tell you that there have been times that I called someone and to make an appointment to interview them for something, and I would say, this is Paulette Bolyard with the Arizona Republic or whatever, and they'd hang up on me because I thought you were trying to sell them a subscription to the newspaper. Well, here's what you do. You call them back and you say, oh, I don't know what happened, but we got disconnected, and I'm calling to tell you that I wanted to come out and talk to you about such and such, that's your story. It all changed. Oh, yeah, well, yeah, sometimes my phone is acting up. They lie about it and everything. But they were defending themselves because they didn't listen to what I was saying. I said, I'm Paulette Bolyard, the reporter, and they hung it up. I don't want the paper, So.
Well, it's already been more than an hour, but as many of these things go, there's more questions that are created during this discussion.
That's what an interview is all about.
You need to do the second, actually, where you can talk about guys like Joe Sprickelli, the personalities that are in the city that make the city the community that it is.
Yes.
So
and Ron Pies.
It's important to have this information for your grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
That's right.
To be able to see. And so, but it's already been over an hour, so.
Well,
it's fun.
I do have
Thank
another
you.
appointment with the city of Mesa to make fun of it. No. Oh, we always had jokes about Mesa. I remember doing one story with Barry Young, who was a talk show host with KFYI, and he lived in Mesa. No, he lived in Tempe, and so Judy Todd with the Tempe magazine had wanted me to interview him. So I interviewed him, and he kept saying these bad things about Mesa. He yelled at his wife, did any good news ever come out of Mesa? And Judy didn't want to print any of that. She did not want to print things that put Mesa down. She said, I'm not in competition. I write for Tempe and Tempe's people and things they're doing. One of the stories I did for her was, and this blew me away, was all the things that are manufactured here in Tempe, Arizona. You'd be surprised. There's a company here, and I don't know if they still exist, this was years ago, but they made tennis ball covers. That's all they made. And you never even think about that when you're out there playing tennis. It's somebody, and it came from here. There were so many things that, were made, and I had to end up by saying, and right in your hands, you have another one that's created here in Tempe, and that's this magazine. So, it was always a way to get a good break in there. But this is a moving city. This is a city where there's people with great ideas, and so somebody's going to get that bridge in that bottle. And it's going to sell like crazy. Now you're all going to go home tonight and think, who do I know could do that?
Thank you so much.
I have some money to invest, so think of it. I'm sorry. I could do 25 minutes. I've done stand-up comedy, and it was fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me here. Like I said, I love Tempe.
You
I don't
do.
want to live anywhere else. This is actually my hometown because this is the longest I've ever lived in a place. I used to live in Washington, D.C., but that was only for 3 years, so loved it there. Indiana. I want all of you to have a great week, and it was very nice to meet all of you and see you smile or laugh or, enjoy what I was saying. And then sometimes I think you would like turn away and go, boy, is she crazy. But I know. See, this is one of the things that I have developed as a reporter. I can know when situations change. I could be in an interview and I can see and feel how that person is feeling, and what's going on and how their mood may change or something happens. And this has been great when I'm with my family because we got lots in the family and I can tell when things aren't doing too well. So.
He was a superintendent for some time, but he also, he lived on the corner of Alameda and McClintock, and right on the corner, at the north-south street that I forget the name of, but he bought that townhome in there when they were not selling very well, so they gave them a big
I
discount.
lived there too.
In that little community, those townhomes in there?
With the walls and all that. I lived on Alameda at 2137.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
And I had a giant
No.
pool and just,
the pool was a
Terrific.
communal pool?
No, it was in her front yard.
It's in my
no,
front
okay,
yard.
no, this is in the townhomes that had a communal pool.
oh, okay.
Okay, so, during this time period, was, the Planned Parenthood started a process here or had an office here?
No, they didn't.
Okay, well, my mother was involved in getting Planned Parenthood in Tempe, but I don't know, what year did
Terrific.
you retire?
Terrific.
What year did you, what year did you leave the paper?
I left the paper in 81, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because there's several, we'll talk about the personalities of these things that go on. But I mean, you were in the newspaper, you would have been involved in, especially in the religious side of those things.
Well, not
How-
for
how
the
about the
Tempe Daily
camels?
News, when I worked for the Republic.
Okay, so how long did you work for the Tempe Daily News?
About 4 years?
Okay, so you were gone by 81.
Yes.
Okay. So you weren't here when they were having the issues with the camels on A Mountain?
Yes, I was, but I never covered any of that.
Okay,
Yeah.
but you did the religious pages for the Republic.
Yes, but for the Tempe Daily News, I did the
Entertainment.
society page, which was
Mhm.
the weddings and all of those. Remember we used to put those in a paper, everybody's wedding, and
Mhm.
big
Mhm.
picture, the bride and groom,
Mhm.
and
Right.
the entertainment pages.
And the Tempe Women's Club, and the Garden Club? and that
Yes,
sort of thing?
all of those, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we had some tremendous clubs here,
Yeah, well, yeah.
Remember the
all those
Follies?
things- All those clubs have degenerated because, the baby boomers and the next generations, I can't remember which they are not joiners. There used to be softball teams, soccer teams, all kinds of events, bowling leagues.
That's because they're always on the phone.
They've always, well.
Am I right? They've always got those phones on.
But I don't know if it's that or not, because everybody's had phones, but the participation in all those group things has waned. It's starting to come back now with this new generation, the 20-year-old
Yes.
kids
Mm.
are coming back.
That's good.
But all those other things have faltered.
Well,
But
do you
did
remember
you-
the Follies when they had that show that a
Right.
director came into town and put on, and they were singing and dancing, and these were people from the clubs.
Right, they had, well, in 1970, that's before you, or 79, I guess, you were still here.
Mm-hmm.
They had the fast pitch softball tournament that came here.
Yes.
That was done by the Kiwanis clubs,
Yes.
a joint effort by the Kiwanis clubs, so. But anyway, I was just making some notes as you were talking about Conley, when you said your kids went to Conley. My wife was a woman PE teacher there.
Oh.
So if you had a daughter, at those years, they hadn't done the Title III stuff yet, so.
Yeah, I knew the principal real well because he called several times about my
Who
son.
who was the principal?
I don't remember his name.
Harry?
I think so.
Brad
but
Andrews?
I think it was Andrews. But
Brad
what
Andrews.
had happened was my son, along with some other kids, had invented this little thing that freshmen had to go through, and that was to flush their head in the toilet.
Oh,
And so I got a call from the principal and the police
that's
department.
McClintock.
No, this was at the junior high.
Not freshmen then, it would just be the young kids, sixth graders.
Well, yeah, sixth graders, not freshmen. Freshman's eighth grade, that's right. But they were the youngest there. That was an initiation for them. And I remember going there and listening to this, and I'm looking at my son going, I can't believe you did this, you know. And nobody doing anything to them. And I said, wait a minute, you need to punish them. And if I were you, I'd give them a stick with a nail on the end and make them clean his campus up.
Well, they'd stopped paddling by that time.
Yeah, you know, I said, you don't want to give them a SWAT. You know,
They
that's
did want
old.
to
You
give
don't
them a
do that.
swat.
But make them clean his campus. They go, we can't do that. I said, well, then how do you discipline someone?
Yeah, that's
You know,
Dr.
do you
Spock.
stick their head in the toilet? I can do
You
that.
You can thank Dr. Spock for that.
Yes,
And-
you're right.
And he never had kids.
That's right. And you know why? He knew better.
And Gracie, you know who Pam Gracie is, ASU? The PE teacher.
Oh,
He has a PE teaching, you know, program. Kids can't compete with each other. Sorry, I don't mean to just prattle on.
one of the fun stories I did with schools was at Thanksgiving time. One year, I went to, I can't remember which school it was, and spoke to the third graders around Thanksgiving. And I asked them to tell me how to cook a turkey. And I want you to tell me how long it takes, at what temperature, what do you put in the turkey, what else do you serve with it. They were hysterical. Some of them were, you know, cooking them for 3 days at, you know, 200 degrees, and, you know.
Well, Art Linklater made a fortune doing that.
Yeah. Oh, well, these were great. And I found that there were parents who took and cut these out and put them next to place settings for the people who were coming for dinner
Oh,
to
that's
read
funny.
them, you know. So,
That's clever.
Well, the city had a Parks and Recreation department and the schools worked together with them. There was a director of the Parks and Rec, maybe Dwayne Dawson. You were only here for 4 years, so.
yeah.
And the Tempe Beach was not there anymore when you came? No, it was gone.
It was just a shadow. Yeah.
Sorry.
But I saw pictures of it.
Yeah,
People, when I moved here, people told me that Buster Crabbe used to work out there.
well, you're talking about the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah.
But that's really something to say. That's where
He swam there.
yeah, he swam there. So.
I am just always so impressed with how much recollection people have. I can barely remember my neighbor's name and who lives there now. And you guys can
have
remember
a good memory. You
things
do.
that happened. So, I mean, everybody that we've interviewed, it's that,
Yeah.
that you know, you, Harry,
Well, it was a
Dr.
good, it was a
Furlong.
good time for us. There's nobody that lived here. I don't know about you, didn't grow up here, but was Mount Carmel down still on College Avenue when, or was the was over here?
New
where it
school
is
was
now?
on. Rural. Yeah.
It was on rural. It used to be on College, north of 8th Street or
Yeah.
University.
mm,
That's where the Mount Carmel was. The school was right across the street from the Catholic Church.
I'm just always so impressed
I-
with how much
Who were the
memory.
doctors that you had when you came here?
I can't remember.
Hughes, Payne, Flynn, Sherman?
Dr. Garner down on,
Okay.
yeah.
So there was enough, all that stuff had been, you know, there have been more and more doctors come to town, but when, you know, there was only 3 or 4, a handful
When
of
you
doctors.
grew up, there was just a
1 or
handful.
2 dentists.
I remember back, I think it was in the late 80s, of interviewing pastors' wives and what their life was
in
like.
Tempe?
Mhm.
All over, like Mesa, Tempe, and everything. But in Tempe, there was a black pastor who was just buying a church and starting it up. And so I went to meet with his wife and we talked. She told me something very interesting. She said when she moved here, there were very, very few African Americans. And she said if you were in a grocery store and you saw someone of color, you wanted to say hi to him because there was nobody in your neighborhoods. There were so few. And I thought to myself, you know, that must have been hard for her. She was great. She was a good interview too, so.
Oh,
yeah.
Well, there were the black families lived over off of 40th Street and what is now University, in that area down in there, and they came to Tempe schools.
Mm-hmm.
So there would be some, but there were a lot of Hispanic families here.
Yes, a lot of Hispanics, but
Yeah.
she was, you know, she said you had to look for them, and you were so excited when you saw another dark face. So
You were talking today, Debbie, about some of the Hispanic families and how some of the scrapbooks are captured in the Tempe History Museum, and hopefully we'll get a chance to interview some people that can talk about.
Yeah, I missed the breakfast on Monday with those guys from Victory Acres.
oh really?
Because they, I was up in the mountains, so
Nice.
they went in and met anyway. I saw Randy, one of the guys that goes there. But we'll eventually, I'm gonna continue this even long after this thing is over with, because I got the bug.
It's so
That's
interesting.
good. That's a
I
good
agree.
bug to have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very interesting.
Because I think these oral interviews and these tapes are recordings and not tapes anymore, are important for the families of the people that are giving the interviews. Just to be able to hear their voice, 20 years after they're gone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But there's more and more of this kind of thing available because of the videos that everybody
I
has.
would love to have something like this for my grandparents. Even my dad, who's passed away, I was saying today, I can't ask him questions. Questions come up all the time that I'd love to ask him.
We talked about this morning. The day after my mother died, I wanted to ask her questions about the genealogy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Because the minute she died, it was all gone,
yeah.
right?
And you talk about the recordings you can do now on Family Search. My uncle has such a great memory. I mean, he's, I think 84 now, but I can call him and he can talk about things that happened in his elementary school and when he was 4 years
that's
old. He just has
fantastic.
great recollection. And when you told me that, I thought, I have got to capture that, because, and my son's a filmmaker and my uncle lives in Burbank. So I'm gonna send him over to my uncles and say, capture some of these stories, because we'll never have these, Our
I think
grandparents are gone.
I think you're right about that, because it's really important for people
Yeah.
to look back as to who came before us. What did they do?
Yeah,
One of the joys of sitting in the newsroom every morning was having Governor Pyle walk through. We still called him Governor. He'd walk
Yeah.
through and say, "Good morning, Governor." And he'd say, "How are you today?" He always had a little joke or a little piece of mine. Or
He was a traffic safety guy for many years after
he
that.
was. He was Eisenhower's
Yeah.
buddy.
Virginia-
Eisenhower used to call him the boy governor.
Well, Virginia is still alive, his daughter, she's
Yeah.
my age, she was in my class.
Oh,
She
really?
lives over here.
Well, she
So-
probably has some great stories to tell.
Yeah, I wanna try to get hold of her. She has fairly severe arthritis, but she's mobile and around. Her husband
Yeah.
is quite sick.
Oh, that's too bad.
But
and I'm
Ray-
always happy to go to someone's house if they don't feel comfortable coming on a Thursday night or driving at night or
Yeah.
driving at all,
Well,
so,
when I told my son, when he said, you know Governor Pyle? And I go, yeah, and he was in junior high, and he goes, we're studying him in our history books. Could you introduce me to him? I said, sure, come down the newsroom, So I kind of stood out in my kid's eyes sometimes. Most of the time it's like,
that was one of the most fun things. When you're a reporter, you get to meet people that you would not ordinarily get to meet. I remember when I was just starting out, I had an editor and she said, who would you like to meet? And I said, oh my gosh, I would love to meet Eddie Basha. At the time, he was known for contributing to education, and he hadn't run for governor yet.
The
but
man of all seasons,
I just really
He
liked
still,
everything.
I don't know, has he died yet? I think.
Yeah.
But,
Oh, yes.
But the family has always been pretty generous.
Oh, I
Yes.
was a new reporter, so I didn't have as much savvy as later. But she called me one day, this editor, and she said, how would you like to go interview Eddie Basha? And I was just in heaven. And so I go to his office, and he's like, would you like a Diet Coke? And of course I say yes, because he's offering it to me, what can I do? And he had a picture on his wall of a lady with, I can't remember, 5 or 6 kids, and this is a new reporter. I didn't really know, I would never say this again, but I said, wow, she looks great for having all those kids. And he said, she didn't have all of them. And it was apparently his second wife, Nadine, which I didn't really realize that, so I learned later to be careful what I say. But he was
heck,
so
I used
funny.
to say dumb things all
He
the
wouldn't
time.
care, he wouldn't care.
Oh no, he actually sent me a bottle of perfume, white linen perfume, and I
Wow.
saved it. I have it to this day. It probably smells terrible now, but I left it in the package just because, and he sent
How
me
nice.
a letter of appreciation. And so he was just such a gentleman and giving to the community. So I mean, you get to do things like that as a normal person, you know, you can't always just go and interview people.
You never know when you do talk to someone who they turn out to be